Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about Karla Homolka, and if you haven't heard this story, it's crazy. It's really crazy. Her and her husband were almost known as Barbie and Ken. They looked picture perfect on the outside. They were really a beautiful couple. And it's funny because somebody on my YouTube channel actually commented below and was like, you should make a video on Karla Homolka. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes. I remember Karla Homolka, that whole case. I remember when I was like maybe 13-ish, give or take a little bit, came on Lifetime, a movie about her and everything that happened. And that was like, I remember that and John Benet Ramsey and of course the Lacey Peterson. Those were the main ones that really spiked my interest in true crimes and things like that. So thank you so much to the person who commented below about doing a video on this, because as I was reading it, I couldn't believe she's actually out living her normal life right now. And what she did and her husband is so haunting. It's wild that she's been out since 2005. So I'm going to talk about this case. I hope you guys like these type of videos. If you do, don't forget to subscribe, like, and let's get to it. Alright, so I'm going to start the story off, and it's a wild ride, and I want to give you guys a little bit of a trigger warning because I have to be honest with you, the details are really sick and really gruesome. So I'm just warning you right now, if you guys get sick to your stomach easily or you're an empath and these things really bug you, this might not be the video for you. Okay. So Paul Bernardo met Karla Homolka when she was only 17 and he was 23. Karla was the oldest of 3 siblings, and everyone always described her as beautiful, eye-catching, radiant, really intelligent, and they said that she had a really soft side for animals. And right after high school, she ended up starting to work for a veterinarian clinic. She really had this girl next door charm. Well, Paul Bernardo was exactly the same way. Blonde hair, looked just like Ken, really cared about his appearance. They immediately had this huge connection and instant attraction towards each other, which they were just both so wicked. I always wonder in this story if they never met each other. Would Paul Bernardo have done the same thing, just lured somebody else? And I wonder, would Karla have done this with somebody else, or would she have taken a different path in life? I always kind of wonder that, and I want to hear your guys' thoughts too, if you believe that if they never had met, none of these things would have happened. Now, it's said that when they met, they both had these really dark, twisted fantasies, and they played up on it with each other, and they really brought that out of each other. Then it became sort of this dominant, submissive roles to where he was in control. He was the master, and he would like whip her and things like that, and she was kind of like his slave. Now, this is where it gets sick quick. Throughout this whole relationship, he was going around young women in Scarborough, and they were aged 13 to 15 years old. And he would do this totally with Karla's approval and okay. Then in 1990, they became engaged, and this is where Paul really became entranced and overly obsessed with Karla's sister, who at the time was 15 and she was a virgin, and he just had some sort of fascination about that, and he was just so mesmerized by her. And it's said that Karla got really jealous of this and really obsessed about it, and she felt like he loved her almost, or liked her in some sort of way, because Karla couldn't give, you know, Paul that virginity. Some sick, twisted way, Karla was really jealous of her sister and that she had this virginity, even though it's not an offering, because Karla's sister wasn't planning on giving it to him. But he just had this fixation on that, and that was something Karla couldn't ever give him. Here's where it gets really disgusting. Most normal people would be absolutely outraged and disgusted, and what's absurd is that Karla ended up encouraging this. She ended up telling Paul that for his Christmas gift, she wanted to give Paul Tammy's virginity. That takes us to December 23rd, 1990, and they're at a Christmas party at Karla's family's home. And this is where Karla ends up spiking her little 15-year-old sister's drink. with animal anesthesia that she had stole from the vet clinic that she worked at. Now later that night, as Karla's family slept, Tammy ended up becoming unconscious. Karla actually ended up holding a cloth over her mouth that was soaked with the anesthesia, and then her and Paul ended up taking turns and then videotaping it. This is where Tammy ends up starting to uncontrollably vomit everywhere. And then they, of course, tried to hide the evidence before they called for an ambulance. Sadly, when the ambulance finally got to her and was able to get her to a hospital, she was pronounced dead there. Now, there was chemical burns on her face, and sadly, they had put in her system were never found, most likely because when you get tested like that, they're actually searching for the specific type of drug. Really just take your blood, and there's not like one test fits all. You kind of have to test it for that specific whatever it is that you're looking for. That's what I've heard. I'm not a nurse, I'm not a doctor. Let me know if times have changed, I'm not sure. But anyway, her death was ruled accidental overdosing from alcohol. And then this brings us to around 1991, where Paul was just infatuated from having a little bit of taste of what he did to Tammy, and he needed to do it again. She lured a girl who she had became friends with at the vet that she worked at and brought her home to show Paul. And that's where Karla and Paul did the exact same thing. They and videotaped it. She ended up surviving, thank God, and I feel like, thank God, she has no recollection of it, thank gosh, because I feel like that would be torture. Later on, Paul and Karla ended up getting married on June 29th, 1991. It was right around the same time a body was found in parts of Lake Gibson. Sadly, the remains were a 14-year-old girl, Leslie, who had disappeared on June 15th. Now, the only difference with Leslie is they did the same thing, but it happened over a course of days. They had kept her locked inside of a room where they had did this day after day. And as her body was being found, they were just partying up, having a wedding. No care for anyone, no care in the world what they did, no remorse, no guilt, nothing. Then that brings us to almost a year later, on April 16th, 1992. This is where they picked up Kristen French, who was a 15-year-old girl that they had picked up walking home from school, and this is just so sad. This time they left her body bruised and beaten in a ditch alongside of a more rural road where there's not a lot of people or traffic, and she had her hair partially shaved. Finally, after the police investigators had gotten some tips and some leads from sketches of what was Paul and what he looked like, tons of tips started to be called in. And in January of 1993, Karla ended up leaving Paul after a huge fight, and she says that he beat her with a flashlight. The course of a few months, they ended up taking Paul's DNA, ended up becoming a perfect match for everything that was going on in Scarsboro back in 1990. After this, he was then put on surveillance, and they followed him around watching his every move, and then they finally arrested him in February of 1993. Of course, when this happened, Karla lawyered right up, and then she wanted to do a plea bargain where she would testify against Paul because he was her soon-to-be ex-husband in exchange for a 12-year sentence, so she promised to give her full cooperation. Police ended up finding all the videotapes that they made down in the basement. I believe they were in some sort of concrete is where Paul put them to try to hide them. And the police saw that Karla was so much involved and just as evil as he was. The deal kind of backfired, and the police almost wishes that they never gave her a plea bargain, but they had to end up holding to it because she was released in 2005. What's really sick is that Karla ended up remarrying and had a child of her own, and she ended up changing her name as well. Paul was found of all charges against him, and in 2018 he applied for parole after being in prison for 25 years, and after 30 minutes of deliberation they said nope, not happening, thank God. Now in 2005, when Karla was released, she did have some stipulations upon her getting out of jail. She had to tell the police if she wanted to change her name. She planned to be away from her home at all for over 48 hours. Police also had to be able to look at her house, and she wasn't allowed to be around anyone who was under the age of 16. 17. With all that being said, I'm a little bit confused at how this is possible, but for a while she worked and volunteered at that baby boy school, and I'm not really sure how that works. I don't know if after a certain amount of time she was allowed around kids again or what, but that is just, ugh, grosses me out. It's really crazy. So let me know what you guys think about this story. Do you think she was pushed by Paul to do this? Do you think she was evil in her own way to begin with? Do you think if they never met this would have happened? I just constantly wonder that. I have no idea. So let me know what you guys think. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you soon.